Good evening, everybody. It is a fantastic Monday. It is 8 o'clock. I usually come on around 6:30, but my schedule has been quite busy. And I talk about consistency all of the time in leadership. And so, what better way to talk about consistency than to model it, right? So even though I have boatloads of things to do, a lot of things on my plate, which is absolutely wonderful, I'm not complaining. um it was easy for me to say, you know what, I'll do it next Monday, but I'm here for you, and I'm being consistent and showing up, which is what I am sure you all are doing as well, in your work. So uh, good evening. My name is Dr. Demia, and I'm here because I am passionate about this work and passionate about empowering school leaders so that they can transform the instructional culture in their buildings, feel affirmed, reduce the burnout, be more effective and efficient in the work that they're doing, because there is a way to go about doing it. And these moments, this live, which is what are your thoughts, is really around, some of the things that I've used in my practice as a leader, some of the things I've seen other leaders do and use. And so I'm sharing it with you because I believe that we have the power to change the system that perpetually discriminates and oppresses the most marginalized students. And so, being one of those students, right? My goal is to be consistent with it, remain authentic, and supporting um, school leaders in the best way possible so that they can maximize their results, right? And so I believe in what Margaret Wheatley said is being brave enough to start the conversation that matters, and I'll add to be courageous enough, right? To create the disruption that's needed to change the conditions that we see that are going on right now. And so today I did a post. I shared a post earlier today around like being exhausted as a school leader, because of feeling like I had to do everything very early in my career. As a new school leader, I just didn't know the beauty of delegation. And so today I'm excited to be here today to talk with you, to talk about the topic of delegation, right? Like, it's really close to my heart because once I learned how to do that, it created a huge shift in the work that I was doing, which was amazing. And so enhancing workplace efficiency is what it's about, like the productivity, and all of those things can occur when you effectively delegate. So let's dive right in and talk about how to effectively delegate. And it's really about, to be or not to be. Are you going to be overwhelmed and completely unsure, or not knowing, or being reactive and not knowing where the next step is? Or are you going to be able to effectively delegate and understand and know what your next steps are because you planned it, right? And so, question: have you ever felt overwhelmed by your workload? It's a rhetorical question, I know, because if you're a school leader, if you're a leader, period, you are often feeling overwhelmed, but there's a way around that, right? And so today we're going to talk about how this delegation can actually give you more hours in your day and transform that feeling, right? Like that delegation can help transform this feeling of being overwhelmed to being focused, right, on what really, really matters. Because the things that drive us a lot of times, and divert us, I should say, are the things that we really shouldn't be paying attention to, because they're tasks that are important, but they don't need to be handled by you as a leader, right? And so delegation, just so that we're all on the same page, is a process of assigning responsibility and authority to others to complete tasks, right? It's very strategic. It's not so, oh, you just go and do it. Because if you know that you have a staff person who doesn't work well with parents, you're not going to ask that staff person to go to the main office and talk to a parent about an incident that happened with a student. You're not going to do that, right? It's very strategic. And so I want to talk today about 5 steps to effective delegation, but I really want to lift up one. And that one that I want to lift up is, how do you assess, right? How do you actually assess your leadership team or your staff to figure out what they would be best doing, right? In terms of delegating things to them. Let's talk about the 5 things, right? The 5 steps for effective delegation. Okay, so the first thing is you need to identify the right task, right? Not all tasks should be delegated. Focus on the routine tasks, tasks that can others can do better than you, right? And tasks that will help them grow. So that's one thing. One thing, you have to identify the right tasks. The second thing is choosing the right people, right? And in order to choose the right people, you have to assess their skills, which is something I'm going to lift in a second. And so choosing the right people means matching the tasks from the first step with the team member's skills and interests, right? Which is something I'm going to talk about a little further. And delegating those tasks to someone who's eager to learn, right? Who wants to do that and excel in an area. That can lead to some outstanding results, right? If people are eager to do things, they're more invested in it. So you're going to try to match those two things, right? The right tasks and choosing the right people. The third thing is providing clear instructions, making sure that what you are asking for is very, very clear, right? I've worked with school leaders to help refine we know that districts have job descriptions, right? But there are specific things that school leaders want from staff in their building. And so I've worked with school leaders to help refine what that looks like so that the expectations for the work is really clear. Okay. So make sure that you are providing those clear instructions. Does the person understand the task, right? Its purpose, which is important because you're not going to ask your team to do something that and there's no purpose, right? It's about investment. How are you getting your staff to invest in the work that you all are doing? And so in order to do that, you really need to make sure that the task is purposeful and that they are clear of the purpose and the expected outcome and the deadlines, right? Like, when do you expect to have this task completed? So clarity is so important so that you avoid any misunderstandings, okay? And the deadlines and outcomes are really important in this clarity, because the next step, which is step 4 to effective delegation, is the feedback loop. So because you have expected outcomes and deadlines, right? You also need to create some time where you are checking in. How are you checking in with your staff to ensure that they are meeting the deadlines, right? If they're having any challenges or need support with something, it's better to make sure that you have these scheduled check-ins, not random. Everything is intentional. Everything is purposeful, right? And consistent. You are scheduling your check-ins. It could be once a month, once every other week. It could be every week until you feel like you can wean the check-ins off a little because the person is showing a strong aptitude with that task that you've assigned them. Okay. So it's important to have those outcomes and deadlines and check-ins to support, because it's not an I got you, it's I got you, right? You want to check in with them and make sure that if they need support, they have it. And if there needs to be any adjustments to the task, that you're having that in those conversations. And then the last thing is, honestly, you have to trust and let go. And that was one of the hardest parts for me, as a person who felt like I always had to be in control, right? Which is another whole piece that I'll talk about at my next webinar. But the 5th step is you have to trust and let go. Like, once you have delegated the task, you have to resist the urge to micromanage. How that person is going to attend to the task is how clearly you have provided the instructions, right? Which is step 3, providing clear instructions. Once you provide the parameters for the task, then you let them run with it. So you have to let your guard down. You have to allow them to run with it in the way that they want to, as long as they understand the purpose and the outcomes, right? If that's really clear, like for me as a school leader, my team always knew that students were first. And any decision that we made, it was asking ourselves as a group, how is this impacting students? How is this in the like the best interest of kids, right? And so you have to trust and let go. And if you plant those seeds and you're asking those questions to your team, they're going to do that too while they're going through this process of completing the task. So I know for me, the hardest part was trusting and let go. Hopefully it won't be so hard for you, but be really intentional about it. Okay. So if you're watching the replay, share your thoughts. What are you thinking about this so far in terms of the 5 steps for effective delegation, which is identify the task, choosing the right person, providing clear instructions, right? Establish a feedback loop, and then trust and let go. Okay. Um, Share your thoughts. What are you thinking? What are your thoughts around this? Have you done this before? Where are you in these steps and the process of beginning to delegate more tasks to your leadership team? So share your thoughts in the comments. I mentioned earlier when I first got on is that I really wanted to lift up the skills assessment, and I'm about to share with you some of the next steps for you as a leader, and how to begin to employ those 5 steps for delegation. So the next steps for you are: 1, identify your task. List the tasks that you can delegate. List the tasks that have, you know, that other people can do well, that you don't need to do because you have bigger fish to fry, which is what I always say, or you have other things that that have a bigger impact on students or your staff and community. So list the tasks that you can delegate, right? For example, special education in any school is important, and a principal needs to be, because we used to talk about going to sped jail. You don't want to do that. So I would sit in the meetings at first, and then once I saw that my assistant principal got a hang of the process and the cadence, and the expectations for the meetings, I didn't go to them anymore unless there was like an advocate there for a parent, or like a parent advocate or a child advocate there. And so you need to figure out which things you can delegate. And it really all depends on, um, how important it is. Well, everything's important. So let me say that. But the thing with the least amount of impact on students, staff, and community, that's what you can delegate, right? Like you shouldn't be deciding how many pencils to order, or how many notebooks to order, or what color something should be. Um, The second thing for you as a leader is assessing your team members. And this is a biggie. Okay. So I'm going to share the steps with you and come back to assessing the team. So the first step is identify the task, list those things. The second thing is assessing your team, your leadership team, right? Determine who can take on these tasks that you just listed based on the skills and interests that they have. And then create a plan, right? List, right? Assign, or assess, I should say. Create a plan for how your leadership team members, a clear plan for delegating these tasks, right? With instructions and check-in points. Remember, I mentioned earlier, you need to have those check-in points to make sure that you are supporting in this delegation process. The fourth thing, next step for you, is communicating clearly, right, to your team. And then the fifth thing you need to do is monitor and support. That is consistency, providing ongoing feedback. So I want to go back to step 3. I'm sorry, to step 2, assessing. How do you assess? Because we hear people say this all the time when they talk about um, delegating and assessing towards your staff's strengths. Assessing is really about you being like having the power of discernment, being able to look and identify the strengths that your leadership team has, each member has, in order to match it with a task, right? So one way that you could do it is you could actually take a like give your team a skills assessment. I like to give an assessment, a strengths finder assessment. Um, Called High Five Test, and that identifies the strengths that your team has, which can provide more insight, right? But that's not the one all. That's one source of data, but there are other sources of data that you should be using to assess your team, right? To evaluate their current skills. So you can conduct skill inventories, right? Using surveys or um, assessments to kind of document the skills of each team member. You could use your compass, thing protocols that give you more insight into who is actually on your team and what are some of the strengths that they bring to the table. um Naturally, you have past performances of your team. What are the things they did last year that they did really well? They took the ball and ran with it and hit it out the park, right? So those are all data sources that you should be using when you are assessing the strengths and skills of your team so that you can start delegating. Um, and then actually having them do self assessments and having conversations with them. One of the places that's really good to do this is at the beginning of the year when you have your initial conversations with your staff and you're asking questions about, things that they did last year that they felt did well that they want to do again this year, right? To give you some insight, because that information is what you're actually going to use throughout the year. Those initial conversations are that's data that you should be using in a real meaningful way, intentional, not just a check off the box because the district said to do it, right? um another way you can assess their skills and strength, your staff's skills and strength, is observing, right? This is qualitative data. Observe their work habits. What are their day-to-day um um how do they handle their current responsibilities, right? How what demonstrates, like, what have they demonstrated? Where have they demonstrated initiative for something, or problem solving skills, or strong organizational skills? Like, you have to have the power of discernment and take the time to actually pay attention and see the skills that they are showing you, right? And it may be something that is not in their current line of work, right? For example, I have a 9 to 5, and that current line, not 9 to 5, is not in my it's not my skill set. I can do it because I'm competent in anything that I do, but it's not my strength, right? My strength is working with leaders. And so being able to identify those things is really important as a leader, because you want your staff to be like feel like they're growing. Because staff leave when they feel like there's no more growth and they feel stagnant, right? We all know this. Another way that you can collect data to observe their work habits is feedback from peers, right? Gather feedback from colleagues and peers who work closely with the team member, right? To get a different perspective. It's about supporting the growth of your team. Okay. Share some thoughts. If you're listening to the replay, what are your thoughts about this? Have you considered um, giving assessments or skill inventories? How do you collect the soft data around what your staff's skills and strengths are so that you can maximize them? Okay. Um, the other piece, the last piece I want to mention is the data source that you can use to actually help you assess your instructional leadership team is like interest assessments. And again, I talked about one of the ways is like a career development plan, but we got a lot of plans in education. You just use the time during your initial conference conversation to discuss career goals. Like, okay, what are some of the things that you did last year really well that you would want to continue to work on? And how can I support you in that? What are some of your aspirations in the role that you have right now? Is this a role that you how long can you see yourself in this role? Where would you like to go? Asking questions about their interests, their aspirations, their long-term goals is such a rich source of data. Okay. So make sure that you are asking those questions at the beginning of the year and coming back to them. For example, when I would ask those questions, I kept everything recorded. And whenever I would have follow up conversations around at like an informal check-in on a lesson that I observed, I would bring some of those pieces up, like, oh, I see, we talked about earlier about how you wanted to improve with your student engagement. And I noticed that this time in your lesson, you had, you know, 50% increased engagement from the last time I came in. And I just want to say kudos. Like tying those things in is so critical because they see a thread. There's a thread in everything that you do as a leader. And your staff will start to feel like, wow, he or she really pays attention to what I want and what I need, right? And is able to make those connections in a very meaningful way, which provides me with the feedback to let me know that I am on the right track, right? Your staff will truly appreciate you when you start having conversations in this way, right? So that's an excellent source of data, like when you are talking about career plans and goals and aspirations and their personal interests, right? I talk very often about qualitative data and gather any piece of information is data. We just don't look at the quantitative pieces, we look at the qualitative as well. And so I believe last week when I was at SRIB, I shared a post around how are you investing in your staff. We can't ask for withdrawals. Michael Bonner talked about this when he presented that you can't ask for withdrawals without investing. And taking a personal interest in what your staff does is very important. Do they like to camp? Do they cycle? Do they are they from the Caribbean? Do they love to listen to soca and reggae music? Do they love ballet? Like, what are their interests that they do outside of work? Because it very often will influence and give you a lot of information about their strengths and skills. Okay. That requires you to be personable and have conversations and sincerely ask, how you doing today? Right? Like, are you walking to every classroom every morning and saying good morning to your staff, even before the students arrive? Right? It's important to check in the same way we ask them to check at the door when kids come in. As a leader, we have to do the same thing. It's so important. And those moments are the qualitative like data sources that you can use to help inform the strengths of your staff, right? Those regular check-ins are very essential because that's where you're actually, having the conversations around the data that you've collected. And now you have enough information where you can actually create a plan, right? Because the next steps for you as school leaders were 5. It was identify the tasks, assess the team members, which is what I just talked about. And now you're going to create a plan. How do you create a plan? How about you create a skills matrix, right? So the matrix will outline a couple of things here. It's going to outline each team member's skills and strengths and against the tasks and and responsibilities that you've listed for your next steps, right? Because you have to list the tasks that you can delegate. And now you're going to list the team members' skills and strengths, right? That need to be that the tasks that need to be delegated and the skills and strength of your staff, right? And so now you have this visual tool where you can actually manipulate it and make lines and make connections to help you quickly identify who's the best candidate for this task, right? How far off is this task from the person's normal responsibilities? Okay. How can I tie in this task to their normal responsibilities? What is the way that I can, share this task and word it in a way where it's purposeful and they understand how the connection is made, right? Or where the connection lies between the task and their strengths, right? And so now you're assigning based on strengths and growth opportunities. Because when you assign people who are really excited about using a skill or strength that they have, they are going to knock it out the park. Okay? Trust me when I tell you, it absolutely works. I remember again early on in my career, I used to come home every day and taking care of things that I felt I needed to, but I really didn't have to because there were other staff that I should have delegated it to, but I didn't know that at the time, right? And I would fall asleep with my head down on the dining room table just about 4 nights out the week, like coming home from school already late, right? And then getting my daughter, feeding her, doing those things that as a mother would do, and sitting up after feeding her, doing work on the computer and falling asleep to where my daughter would have to wake me up and say, Mommy, come upstairs and go to bed. And then one day she said, Mom, she was so much younger. She said, why do you work so much? Why you come home every single day and you're on the computer after work and you don't spend any time with me? That hit me like a ton of bricks. And when I tell you it was the shift that I needed to begin delegating, right? To hear the pain in my daughter's voice to say that to me made me realize like I have to do something different because I can't fall asleep every night like this at the dining room table and I can't miss my daughter. And this time that this age that she is, I will never get that back. I have to do something different. And so I promised her right then and there that she was right. And 2 days out of the week, it was 2 days, it was 3 days out of the week, I promised that I would come home and not do any work. I could only have 2 days. And she held me to that. Monday and Tuesday would come and I'm there doing work. And then she would remind me before going to bed, Mommy, that was Monday and Tuesday. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday is mine. And she was my accountability partner. She was the best accountability partner I could have ever had because it actually helped me make the shift that I needed. And I learned how to begin to delegate because I started, like I had noticed, I had collected data around the people's strengths, my staff's strengths, especially my leadership team. And so I had been collecting that data anyway and just, you know, using that information in different ways to help with the functionality and efficiency of how we operated the school. But then I began to use it differently when I made the shift in terms of assigning them things. And the biggest piece I had to do was to let it go. Right. So once you do that, you got to let it go. Okay. Um, and now is a good time for you to start thinking about, your staff that's returning and some of the things that you did last year as a school leader that you can actually begin to delegate to your staff. So start jotting those things down now and thinking about them now, right? Like who can you assign these specific things to? So just keep in mind, like assessing your team member skills and strengths, right, it's so critical in effective delegation and to avoid burnout as a leader. We need y'all. Okay. Don't go anywhere. So you have to delegate. So understand their strengths and their aspirations. And be really strategic and intentional with the conversations. Okay. And take this time this summer to really think that through. And I'm here if you want to connect on how to strategize the delegation and work through the matrix. I'll be happy to chat with you. We can set up an accelerator call. I'll put the link for the calendar in the comments, or you can contact me via DM or at contact at driven, VYNLLC at .com. Sorry, not at Gmail. So it's contact at drivenllc.com. Yeah, and let me know what support you need, okay? Because the summer's over already, and you are deep in the throes of finalizing your strategic planning. So now is the time to connect and to really reflect on how you're going to delegate this upcoming school year. So keep going, y'all. We need you, okay? We need you. And so I will catch you next week. Next Monday, I will be in the wonderful state of Maryland. And I'm probably going to come on earlier because I have to travel, but I'll be on the train around this time or be driving around this time. So I'll catch you next week. Let me know your thoughts about anything that I've shared. Share your experiences in the chat, in the comments, and keep going, y'all. Have a great night.